way to monitor your children anymore. It isn't like when I was growing up where you said, well, you can't go to the R-rated movie. I mean, it's now ubiquitous. And I wonder, what kind of concerns that creates,
Do we have to monitor our children all the time, though? I mean, I think the opportunity to dialogue about this is really important, too. I mean, yes, you need to protect your children, but I think when things come up, they're going to get exposed to things. It's like the see no evil, hear no evil. Most of what I learned about sex was on the school bus, and it wasn't really accurate. And so I think sometimes these are opportunities, and I get the intention behind it is to protect, but you can overprotect. Sometimes it's about opportunities to dialogue, to explain things, to talk things through, and at some point, it's going to get impossible to monitor. Just impossible. Once we start getting into virtual reality and where there's really blurred lines between when we're in that internet world and we're in the real world. So I think it's about evolving our education and evolving our dialogue and communication.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly add to that. I think that, I think I'm the oldest person on the panel, probably the only baby boomer on the panel, and it's been hard to push myself into the new technology and to be a younger person and think like a younger person that way. Mm-hmm. But I remember how my parents' generation looked at the rock and roll baby boomer generation, and sex, drugs, and rock and roll was going to destroy us. And that didn't happen, and it hurt some people, and then some people had to grow beyond it. I think we had different sexual mores than the generation before us, and the generation before us got scared to death. And there is a current generation of parents who are looking at their kids and saying, oh my God. And I agree with the panel. I think for some people there will be problems, more people than perhaps there would have been problems had they not had access to all this material. But to say that the whole generation is going to be negatively affected is an overreaction.
Just adding to that briefly from my experiences, often, more than not, the kids are the hardest to protect, not because of the technology that's available, but they just don't want to be protected. I mean, children are notorious for overriding the system, wiping the hard drive so they can get on there. They don't care, So my point being is that ultimately it's up to the parents to, have open discussion with their kids and educate their kids, because, if children want to do something, or kids or teenagers, they'll find a way, more so than adults.
Okay, terrific. Well, let's go on to our next question. We've had over 3,000 years of religious repression of sexuality, and some people feel that that sexual addiction is just the medicalization of sexual repression. I guess I'm wondering, this is really directed to Rob Weiss, what exactly is sexual addiction? And, are things like social networks, smartphones, and mobile apps responsible for increasing sexually addictive behaviors?
There's no question that there is such a thing as sex addiction, and that it is escalating. We define it as someone who has lost control over their behavior, so they say to themselves, I'm not going to look at this, I'm not going to do this anymore, I'm not going to go to that place, and they seem unable to keep their commitments around sexual behavior choices, just like an alcoholic or drug addict. They have consequences because of their behavior, and they return to it over again, like getting fired or having a spouse say, I don't want to be with you if you continue this. They are very preoccupied and obsessed with it, and sex addiction is really not the same as sexual interest, sexual arousal, sexual attraction. Sex addiction is about using a behavior and sort of a series of behaviors to fill an emptiness inside that has really nothing to do with sex. The people that I work with are looking for attention, validation. They're looking to be nurtured, to feel important, to feel special, like all of us are, but they don't know how to do that in intimate relationships, and they keep themselves from intimate relationships. Even when they're married, they keep themselves non-intimate with their partners and feel safer going out into what they would call controllable situations, like online sex, hooking up for anonymous experiences, having affairs, all of that. I think the best way to talk about sex addiction is when I'm on planes, people often ask me what I do for a living, and I say, well, I'm a sex addiction specialist, and that usually quiets them. So I don't have to talk to them. But once in a while, I'll have some guy who says to me, wow, that sounds like fun. That's the kind of addiction I'd like to have. A sex addict, you could get laid all the time, and I just say to him, well, hey, do you like the occasional cocktail? He's like, yeah, I like to have a glass of wine occasionally. Well, listen, you'd love being an alcoholic. And so that's how I can define, there is a small percentage of the population who is going to struggle with problematic sexual behavior, and that percentage of the population is going to increase as people have greater and easier access to sexual content. In my day, like I said, being the oldest person here, if I wanted to look at porn, I had to, get dressed, get in my car, drive to a porn shop in some place I didn't want to be seen. I mean, I had to rent it, usually go back and return it 3 days later. What does it take to get porn now? and how does the immediacy of the access and the anonymity, all of those moments where someone might have said, well, I don't think I'm going to look at that, or I'm not going to go there, or maybe this isn't a good idea, all that's gone. So anyone who's impulsive, compulsive, has emotional or social issues, they are more likely to be challenged by the access and affordability and anonymity that sexual content has today.
I'm a love addict, so I'm the partner to the sex addict, and I've dated a lot of sex addicts because they attract each other. And the way it was explained to me, because I actually went to rehab for love addiction, because I got very obsessed for 12 years with one guy, and then the second one was for 4 years, and it's intimacy disorder for both. And my subconscious keeps me preoccupied and obsessed with someone who's emotionally unavailable, so I can't have a relationship. The way it was explained to me in rehab was my dad abandoned at 3 years old. So I just had this fantasy of what a guy is, what a man is. And then when I meet someone that either looks like him or acts like him, I get very obsessed, and he's typically emotionally unavailable. He is most likely the sex addict. He focuses on sex to avoid intimacy. And they just go from partner to partner to partner, and they think that they're very into sex. It's not so much that they're so into sex as they're not into intimacy, and they don't even know it. It's their subconscious that's saying, you can't connect, don't connect, you could get hurt. And they typically come from enmeshment with a parent. So it's like the one that got abandoned obsesses, and the one that gets enmeshed with a parent just, it becomes the sex addict and just has a hard time forming relationships, but most of it's in the subconscious. They don't even know. I thought I was in love for 12 years with a guy that didn't love me. I had no idea it was pathological. I had no idea it was an intimacy disorder, just like the sex addict.
What do you say to people, though, who feel that the diagnosis of sexual addiction is just a label of convenience to avoid responsibility for infidelity and poor behavior,
I got to jump on that one just because, I don't know. Every time someone famous or some major figure screws up around sex, the media always asks, well, why would someone why would a smart person or an attractive person do such a stupid thing? It has nothing to do with intellect. It's an emotional vulnerability.